All right, y'all, what's going on? Welcome to the Monday night live stream. All right, put a one in the chat if y'all can hear me clearly. If I'm coming through too loud, too low, let me know. Dusty Macro. All right, coming through with the comments right out the gate. What is it? The fact that there are vegan Olympians with superb biomarkers means you truly take pleasure in paying others to harm animals for your pleasure. Case closed. All right, that's a take. And I guess we could talk more about the ethics of plant-based nutrition, right? And I'm gonna talk a little bit about some of that, right? Because the whole vegan Olympians thing. Yeah, I mean, look, you know, most human foods are plant-based. I mean, most human foods come from plants, and all medicine comes from plants. That's just how it is, right? So yeah, I mean, the earth gives us everything that we need, right? So there's no need for the violence, right? But some people, they may disagree, right? So there's a cultural differential there. And speaking of plant-based meals here, I've got, oh, that's good. I've got kasha, bell pepper, diced red onion, about 4 ounces of extra firm tofu, roasted cashews, or dry roasted cashews in here. And this is seasoned with taco seasoning, nutritional yeast, smoked paprika, basil, sea salt, cumin, and cayenne pepper. Absolutely banging stuff. Folks are traveling for the holidays, so we're a little light tonight. But big shout out to everybody tuning in on Instagram. I'm gonna have to catch the replay back. Hopefully, the good brother puts it on YouTube. I'm on YouTube right now. Yeah, so for you tuning in on Instagram, I'm also live on YouTube right now. And for those of you who tuning in on YouTube, I'm live on Instagram right now. But yeah, I was actually supposed to finish with this meal earlier today, but it was just a busy day. I've got my basil tea. So I got the basil in here. I mean, not basil tea. This is burdock root tea. So I got my tea on deck. Burdock root tea is so good. I love burdock root. Oh my God. And it smells amazing. My top 2 favorite teas at the moment definitely are basil and burdock. Basil and burdock are where it's at. Absolutely love those. But tonight, we got to tune in and talk about, someone referred a video to me. And the video is about the 10 lies that people tell about a keto and carnivore diet. Now, what's interesting is with the video, he lumps in keto and carnivore together, which keto and carnivore are actually a bit different from each other. They're not really the same thing. With a carnivore diet, typically the protein is too high. So the carnivore diet is a high protein diet, mostly. And a keto diet is more of a high fat diet with moderate levels of protein and very little, if no carbs whatsoever. Right. So there's a very big difference there. So people lump in keto and carnivore as a diet together. And that doesn't really particularly work, because if you're going to have a meat-based diet, especially if it's going to be like beef and things like this, it's going to be very high protein. And, you know, the fat is going to be low compared to the protein. The only way a carnivore diet is going to be high fat is if you got a lot of dairy in it, a lot of cheese and milk and things like this, which, I mean, 76% of the population is going to be blown up by that, because 76% of the population is lactose intolerant. So I wouldn't really advise that. Milk is for babies. Milk is for babies, folks. Milk is for babies. But, you know, folks do what they do. All right. I'm not going to take up too much more time. So we're going to get into it. So this video that was suggested to me, we're going to take a look and see what's going on here. And let me know if y'all can hear the video clearly.
Welcome back to the Metabolic Health Docs YouTube channel. Today we're busting 10 of the biggest lies about the keto and carnivore diets that have kept people from giving these lifestyle changes a real shot. If you've ever been told things like eating fat makes you fat, or keto will give you nutrient deficiencies, then stick around. I'm here to separate fact from fiction and break down the truth with science-backed facts and real-life examples. So let's get into it, guys. But before we begin, make sure to comment about which fact was the one you either still believed before this video or took the longest for you to disbelieve. Lie number one, all fat is bad for you. For decades, we've been told.
That's very interesting, right? So he starts off with this is the 10 lies told about a keto and carnivore diet. I have never heard anybody say that all fat is bad for you. I've never heard anybody say that. That is actually a wild claim. Because if you say that all fat is bad for you, that would include every food on the planet. I mean, even fruits that are mostly carbohydrates. I mean, even apples have fat in them. A very marginal degree, but they still do. I mean, you have blackberries have fat in them, blueberries have fat in them, kiwis have fat in them, coconut, avocado. I mean, leafy greens have fat in them, right? Nuts and seeds, hemp seeds, flax seeds, everything has fat in them. So the idea that anybody says that all fat is bad for you is a wild claim to make. So I doubt very seriously, and this is like a doctor, I forget his name. What is his name? Something Hamilton or whatever the case is. I don't know. This video was given to me. I got to figure out. I'll leave his name in the description or something like that. This video was suggested to me and they sent me the link here. Okay, but let's see what he says.
Told that fat, especially saturated fat, is the cause of heart disease. But the science tells a completely different story. Research, including studies published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, show no clear link between saturated fat and heart disease. In fact, fat is essential for hormone.
Okay, so basically, that's not true what he said. He's misciting the studies. So that claim technically, when he says there's no correlation, I mean, it depends on what you mean by that, right? The language there is a bit loose. Now, saturated fat doesn't inherently cause heart disease. And the thing is that inside the bodies of mammals, saturated fat is where it is produced, right? Your body makes saturated fat. Saturated fat is found in things like nuts, right? So you can get saturated fat in cashews, you can get saturated fat in walnuts, coconut, right? You can get saturated fat pretty easily. However, it's a dose-dependent thing, meaning as you increase the amount of saturated fat in your diet, it produces certain negative results. Saturated fat, depending on how much of it you consume, can act as a mitochondrial disruptor. Okay? So you have mitochondria inside your cells, which are basically the energy producing centers of your cells. And as you increase saturated fat, what happens is this disrupts the structure of your mitochondria. So as opposed to having long, dense mitochondria formation, you actually get that mitochondria broken up into smaller formations, right? Smaller pieces of mitochondria, right? And so this makes them less effective, right? When they get broken up into these smaller structures. And so as you increase the load of saturated fat, you get this mitochondrial disruption and insulin resistance. And that insulin resistance gets worse. And as that insulin resistance gets worse, you get things like elevated triglycerides, you get insulin resistance, high A1C, you get excessive blood sugar, and then excessive blood sugar then leads to, or often leads to, high blood pressure, stress on the kidneys. This can lead to excess glycation of cells as a result of the oversaturation of glucose inside your bloodstream, right? And so these things create an environment where you can develop heart disease, right? That's more of a thorough explanation of it. So if you increase that saturated fat in your metabolic environment enough, and you saturate your blood with fat enough, you get that insulin resistance, and then you put protein on top of it, you get high blood fats, you get high blood sugar, you get high levels of protein, so you get higher cholesterol, and you get more inflammation, so more oxidative stress, more metabolites and free radicals than accumulate inside your body. You can get more damage to your endothelial cells inside your vascular tissues, inside your intestinal tract and things like this. And that damage, your body responds to that damage by plugging up those areas with this plaquish substance that is made from a variety of different lipids and proteins and things like this, right? It's called atherosclerosis or atherosclerotic plaque, right? And you can get excess mucus formation inside your gut and these types of things. And all of these things lead to heart disease. So sure, saturated fat in and of itself doesn't cause heart disease. That's true, but he's misrepresenting the data with the language there. I don't know if he's intentionally doing that. I'm not accusing him of anything, right? But it's my understanding that this man has a medical background and is specialized in metabolic health, so he should understand what I just explained. All right, anyways, let's continue here.
Production, brain function, and even weight management. That's important for a weight management doc. Fat can keep you full, stabilize blood sugars, and help you burn more fat for energy. So instead of fearing fat, let's understand that not all fats are created equal. The best fats are from animals. Can you believe that? And the worst fats are those pesky trans fats.
So what's funny is he put up a picture of like red meat, I guess on a grill, getting charred up as he's talking about fat. That's more so a representation of protein, not fat. But that's just me being petty. Does increasing your saturated fat intake Oh, no shot. You got to be kidding me. It's always something. My mic just shut off. What the in the battery is. Oh, all right. Let's see if this works now. All right. Put a one in the chat if y'all can hear me clearly. So I don't know how much of that you missed. All right. I lost my train of thought, but hopefully this thing will stay on and we should be good to go. All right. So I got a one in the chat. Okay. So yeah, basically that's essentially how your body's energy system works, right? Um, that's not like necessarily a benefit of eating saturated fat. It's actually difficult to avoid eating saturated fat. And there's not much of a benefit in avoiding eating saturated fat necessarily. The only thing you should really do is minimize the amount of saturated fat you consume. So there's a bit more nuance. It's not a thing of whether it's good or bad. It's a thing that you just get as just a result of eating, right? It's a matter of dosage, like how much of it you're actually eating. You said we all of that? Y'all got yeah, y'all probably gonna have to let me know where y'all lost me in the comments because I don't know when my mic shut off. He said he gonna have to redo this whole stream. All right. Yeah, I'm gonna have to like do a pre-recorded reaction to this video, huh? All right. You said we missed all of that. Okay, so let me start back again. Let me replay it. Let me go through this. Let me go through this here.
Was the one you either still believed before this video or it took the longest for you to disbelieve. Lie number one, all fat is bad for you. For decades.
Okay, so all fat is bad for you. Did y'all hear me cover that one? If I need to re-explain that, let me know. If y'all want me to re-explain that one. Put a two in the chat if you want me to redo it. Put a one if you want me to move on to number two. Or just type in redo if you want me to go back over point number one. All right. Redo it. All right, so I'll redo it. So we're going to do this one more time. Let's go back. Right
Or it
there.
took the longest for you to disbelieve. Lie number one, all fat is bad for you. For decades, we've been told that fat, especially saturated fat, is the cause of heart disease.
All right, so I've never heard anybody say that all fat is bad for you. I've never heard anybody make that claim. That's actually a pretty nutty claim to make, right? Because that implies that like breast milk is bad for you. That implies that like coconut yogurt, coconut milk, any kind of yogurt, avocado, nuts and seeds, basically any food, right? Because all foods have fat in them. Even like blueberries and blackberries, raspberries, even these foods have fat in them, right? Fruits and vegetables, they'll have like monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats. So, this idea of anybody saying all fats are bad for you is actually a very nutty claim that I've never heard anybody make, right? So I doubt very seriously that he's actually heard anybody or he's actually heard people just commonly say that. I don't believe him when he says that. So we're getting onto a bit of a rocky, or we're getting off to a rocky start here because he's already opening up with some very dubious claims. But here, but all right, let's keep going.
But the science tells a completely different story. Research, including studies published in the American Journal of
Now, and I'll let him finish here, but he's basically saying how people say that saturated fat is the cause of heart disease. Right. Let's replay it back a little bit so we can get the full picture of what he said.
We've been told that fat, especially saturated fat, is the cause of heart disease. But the science tells a completely different story. Research, including studies published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, show no clear link between saturated fat and heart disease. In fact, fat is essential for hormone production, brain function, and even weight management. That's important for a weight management doc. Fat can keep you full, stabilize blood sugars, and help you burn more fat for energy. So instead of fearing fat, let's understand that not all fats are created equal. The best fats are from animals. Can you believe that? And the worst fats are those pesky trans fats.
All right. So he says there's no clear link between saturated fat and heart disease. Technically, this is true. Now, I don't know if he was accidentally careful with the language there or deliberate, right? But either way, technically, that's true. Does saturated fat cause heart disease, or is there a link to heart disease? I mean, the word link is doing a lot of work there, right? Now, saturated fat is linked to heart disease, but it depends on the foods you're eating, right? So for example, there's a lot of saturated fat in coconut. Now, is coconut going to cause heart disease? No, right? Now, what the scientific data has showed is that there is a strong link between animal products like red meat, pork, and things like that for heart disease. So this is one of those things where he's misrepresenting the claims again, right? So basically, this is called a straw man. This is where you make an argument or provide a rebuttal to an argument that no one's really made, right? Now, as far as saturated fat can be harmful depending on the dosage or how much of it you're consuming, right? So for example, if you eat enough saturated fat, let's say you eat a large portion of your diet from saturated fat, right? Let's say, your diet could be like around 40% saturated fat or something like this, right? Or like a really high amount of saturated fat. It can be even higher than that. The more saturated fat you consume, the more that saturated fat will act as a mitochondrial disruptor. Mitochondria is the energy producing centers of your cells, right? So mitochondria are like these, you can see them, like healthy mitochondria is like a long tubular kind of thing, right? And that's like a healthy, efficient mitochondria. And then there's mitochondria that are, kind of inefficient and disrupted. And those are more smaller sized, little tiny mitochondria broken up into different multiple sections, right? And they can even be kind of sparse. And so basically those are mitochondria that have been broken down and inhibited, meaning they don't work very effectively, right? And so as you increase saturated fat intake, that can destroy the mitochondria inside your cells. And over time, this makes you insulin resistant and eventually leads to things like diabetes and Alzheimer's and things like this. Let me switch my earphone here. There we go. So, but this is a dose-dependent thing. So if your diet is high in like bacon and pork and chicken and red meat and all of this type of stuff, and you're putting butter on everything and fried foods and oils and cheese and all of that, and yeah, basically all of that is a tremendous amount of saturated fat that can destroy the mitochondrial function inside your cells and give you high blood pressure, diabetes, Alzheimer's, and heart disease. But the heart disease is like a thing that's caused by all of these other issues. So for example, as your mitochondria gets disrupted and broken down, your cells become insulin resistant, which means they don't take up glucose as effectively. So your bloodstream gets saturated with glucose. And then if you have a high fat diet, your blood is also getting saturated with lipids, which are basically fat. And then when you're consuming protein, now your blood is getting saturated with amino acids from the protein. So you end up having, like, for example, on a kidney test, you'll see high creatinine and high BUN, which is blood urine nitrogen. And what that shows is there's excess nitrogen inside your bloodstream and inside your urine, okay, accumulating there because you have your metabolism is functioning poorly. And the creatinine levels are basically a signifier of excess meat consumption and oxidation of the proteins in your body. And that creates a metabolite or a waste product known as creatinine. And usually this is expelled through your kidneys. So if you have high BUN and high creatinine, as well as other inflammatory markers like ApoB, which is often increased by processed foods. When I say processed foods, I mean foods that dehydrate you. So these are like very like dry, oily foods that are processed and stripped of any kind of water or fiber in them, right? So that raises your blood pressure. This can cause damage to the endothelial layer of your vascular tissues. And so your body tries to patch up the damage to the endothelial layer, which is the inside layer of your vascular tissue. And it patches that up with cholesterol, right? Cholesterol basically are lipoproteins. So you get these different proteins and lipids that come together to form cholesterol. And so your body will keep patching up that endothelial damage with that cholesterol. And that leads to atherosclerosis or atherosclerotic plaque, right? So that can contribute to heart disease in a variety of different ways, right? You can get this atherosclerotic plaque buildup and it can narrow your arteries and that can run up your blood pressure. That plaque can harden or calcify your arteries to the point where your arteries can't really dilate. You can have a heart attack or a stroke as a result of that. You can have a piece of the plaque break off and get stuck in a smaller artery, and that can cause a stroke and things like that, right? So it happens this way. For you to get heart disease, it's not really a sudden thing. It's been a thing that's been developing your body over a very prolonged period of time. Is it just created by saturated fat? No, but it's one of the key components in facilitating and creating those conditions, right? So it's a bit more nuanced than that. Now, him as a doctor and a metabolic specialist, he should know that, but being that he runs a keto channel, he doesn't really have a good motivation for explaining that to you, right? Because that kind of cuts against the whole keto thing. So he's oversimplifying the whole situation. Because of course, if you're a keto advocate, right, you kind of don't really want to go into depth about these things and the nuances of it. I mean, as a medical professional, he should, but people do what they do. Now, as far as the whole weight management thing and the best fat comes from animal products, and there's no evidence for that. As a matter of fact, of all the scientific literature that showed, it's actually demonstrated that mono and polyunsaturated fats are actually medicinal fats, where they reverse a lot of chronic diseases while saturated fat makes it worse. So when I was explaining the whole thing about mitochondrial disruptors and how saturated fat disrupts your mitochondrial function, polyunsaturated fats do the opposite, right? So in the scientific studies, if you ever want to look this up, they're referred to as PUFAs, right? Polyunsaturated fatty acids, right? PUFA for short, PUFA. So there's plenty of scientific data that actually shows, right? If you wanted to reverse insulin resistance or improve your blood pressure or decalcify your arteries and things like that, those polyunsaturated fats actually are medicinal foods in that way to help reverse a lot of those conditions, right? So not all fat is bad. That's an insane claim to make. But when it comes to dietary fats, for example, it's not even necessarily about the individual fats itself, but it's more so about the food that it's packaged in, right? What food are you getting the fat from, right? Because you don't sit down to eat a meal and it's like, oh, it's time to eat my saturated fat meal. It's not really how that works, right? It all comes down to food choice. Now, what's interesting is in the end of that, he said, in the best sources of fat are actually coming from animal products, and the worst fats are trans fats. He doesn't mention polyunsaturated fats or monounsaturated fats at all, which is very interesting to me, right? Let me play that back. Hold on. Let's play that claim one more time.
Blood sugars and help you burn more fat for energy. So instead of fearing fat, let's understand that not all fats are created equal. The best fats are from animals. Can you believe that? And the worst fats are those pesky trans fats.
Those pesky trans fats, right? So he skipped over polyunsaturated fats and monounsaturated fats altogether, right? Which is kind of weird because if you're talking about fats, why would you just focus on saturated fats, not even address polyunsaturated fats or monounsaturated fats, and then go over to trans fats, which we already know are horrible for you in the first place? It's a bit odd, right? Because I mean, if you're going to talk about fat, which also you find in a keto diet, right? If you're using olive oil, if you're using avocado oil, if you're eating avocado, yeah, those are polyunsaturated and monounsaturated fats. So to leave that out is a bit odd. Now, when you talk about like saturated fat being good for weight management, are saturated fats good for weight management? No, not really, right? Fat in general, is it good for weight management? I mean, it depends, right? But you got to be a bit more nuanced. Well, you just say, oh, it's good for weight management. Well, how so? So basically, you have this energy system, and a big part of your energy system are like these hormones. So you have your pancreas, and it has insulin producing beta cells, and it has glucagon producing alpha cells. So when you eat like a lot of carbohydrates, your body, or any carbohydrates, your pancreas releases insulin. When you consume dietary fats and protein, your pancreas produces or secretes glucagon. And these insulin and glucagon hormones, they signal to your pancreas also and signal to your body to regulate your leptin and ghrelin hormones, which are your hunger hormones. When you feel hungry, ghrelin goes up, signals you to eat. When you're satiated, ghrelin goes down and leptin goes up, right? So if you eat a significant amount of saturated fat or any kind of fat and protein, that raises glucagon and lowers ghrelin and raises leptin, right? And then the mediator in your pancreas that regulates the two is somatostatins, right? So it's like this referee, it's the middleman, right? So it's like this switching back and forth between these different hormones. And so as glucagon increases, your adrenal glands respond and they release more adrenaline, right? And in general, your adrenal glands will release more hormones that are kind of like stress hormones, which are catecholamines, right? That's like the whole group they're categorized in. And so this signals more lipolysis, which is the metabolizing and breaking down of fat, right, into smaller molecular particles, into simple lipids and things like that, and glucose, etc. And lipogenesis, which is the formation of more complex fat structures, that decreases, right? So you reduce lipogenesis, you increase lipolysis, and that gives you more fat metabolism or more fat burn, right? That's what happens when you eat protein and fat, right? So people learn that and they go, oh, if you want to lose weight, you increase your protein and fat intake and you reduce your carbohydrate intake. That's where people get that idea from, right? Does it work? It absolutely does, right? It's a large reason why people do it, right? But again, there's nuance to it. So this is very good up front. And in fact, your body does this as a survival mechanism. So when you have all of these fatty acids, when you have all of these amino acids from protein digestion and metabolism, you're getting a lot of acid accumulation. And so when you increase the amount of acidity in your body, this gets registered as a threat inside your body, which kicks on your adrenal function. And as your adrenal function gets kicked up and elevated, your kidney function also gets dialed up because your adrenal function basically signals to your kidneys to ramp up the filtration rate, right? In order to manage the acid accumulation that's happening inside your blood as a result of all this acid, right? Because your body has to balance your pH level. So your adrenal glands kick on, your heart rate increases, your oxygen uptake increases, and that helps to clear the metabolites and acid accumulation out of your blood and filter your blood, right? And it's an alkalizing effect to counteract all the acid that you're getting from your food, right? Now, of course, this is a thing that your body does in the short term, but your body can become overwhelmed when you do this in a chronic way, right? When you're engaging with these types of foods in a pathological way, and your kidneys can become overwhelmed. And you start to see this because as you're consuming all the saturated fat and protein, you become more insulin resistant. As you become more insulin resistant, your blood sugar increases, your triglycerides increase, right? Your blood pressure often increases. You get more vascular constriction, especially to the portal vein of the kidneys, right? Because of all the inflammation, the acid buildup. If you sustain these conditions over a long enough period of time, you end up with things like fatty liver, kidney disease, diabetes, neuropathy, acid reflux, gout, things like this, right? And that's because of this oversaturation of glucose, fat, and protein inside your blood, right? So if you have kidney disease and it's like a real significant problem, it'll show up in blood tests. So you'll have high creatinine, which is often a result of protein oxidation and a lot of animal product consumption, right? So that's what creatinine symbolizes. So when you get this elevated creatinine, that's usually a sign of a lot of protein breakdown and oxidation in your body and a lot of animal product consumption. It could be one or the other or both. And then BUN is blood, urine, nitrogen, right? So as you accumulate all of this protein, which protein is basically scientifically categorized as nitrogen. Nitrogen is protein in its simplest form. And so when you're getting a lot of protein in your diet and you're also dehydrated and your blood sugar is also high, you got a lot of vascular constriction and inflammation, you can accumulate excess levels of nitrogen in your blood, and that has to be filtered out through your kidneys, right? And so this can become pathological, and all of that together can contribute to, or often does contribute to, obesity, fatty liver disease, all those things, eczema, psoriasis, all types of nastiness, diabetes, and heart disease, right? So with the vascular constriction, the calcification of arteries and things like that, yeah, you can get a heart attack, stroke, these types of things, right? That plaque formation that has been used in order to plug up the endothelial damage inside your vascular tissues, a piece of that plaque can break off, it can get lodged inside an artery, and then boom, you got a stroke or heart attack, whatever the case is, right? Pretty scary stuff. So I'm explaining all of this basically to demonstrate that fat can be good for you, and it often is, but it's a dose-dependent thing. I mean, the more you overconsume it, then it becomes pathological. Mammals typically don't do well on a high-fat diet with frequent eating, right? Typically, mammals with a high-fat diet don't eat very often, right? Even you think about obligate carnivores. They eat one big meal, they eat as much as possible in one given setting, and then they go the next few days without eating at all. They don't eat frequently, right? Because your body has to process all this stuff you just ate, right? It's got to clear out all the animal products out of your body. It's got to clear out the waste, the metabolites, right? And your body has to basically balance out, right? Your liver has to empty out toxins, metabolites, these types of things. This is why, like, house cats very frequently get diabetes, urinary tract infections, kidney disease, things like this. And they're obligate carnivores, right? And they're not able to manage the acid buildup inside their bodies if they're just always eating from the excess of food all the time, right? So, they're obligate carnivores, but they're also obligated to fast because the fasting period allows your body to clear out waste and reset, right? So when you're eating like 3-4 meals a day and it's all of this fat and protein and whatnot, yes, with every meal, you're increasing the chances of developing some type of metabolic pathology. So you'll never hear me say fat is bad, right? You'll never hear me say, oh, you need to eat more fat because it'll help you lose more weight and all this type of stuff. It's a bit more nuanced than that, right? So you don't want to imply this oversimplicity of the issue because it falls in line with some type of brand or lifestyle diet thing you're trying to push, right? But anyways, let's continue here. Let's see what else he has to say.
Lie number 2, you'll get nutrient deficiencies on keto or carnivores. In reality, animal-based foods are some of the most nutrient-dense options available. Red meat, for example, is rich in highly bioavailable B12, iron, zinc, and essential amino acids. A well-balanced keto or carnivore diet can meet, in many cases, exceed your nutrient needs, especially when compared to the typical high-carb diets. For instance, vitamin D, B12, and heme iron are commonly found in animal products, while these are often deficient in plant-only diets. And if we were to use spinach as an example, guys, you only absorb 2% of the iron in spinach, while with meat, it's in the 35 to 40% range for iron absorption. That's a huge difference. Lie number 3.
All right, so this is one of those things with the oversimplification, right? Maximizing nutrient absorption can be beneficial, right? Are animal products very rich in nutrients? Certain ones, right? That is true, like the ones he mentioned, like iron. The B12 thing, not really. Most people who have a B12 deficiency actually eat meat. Most people who are anemic eat meat. So the iron absorption thing, it's not, this is what I mean about the oversimplicity, right? You can be getting a lot of iron in your diet and still be anemic, okay? You could be getting a lot of B12 in your diet and still have a B12 deficiency. It's not that simple. First of all, B12 is a postbiotic made inside your gut, right? So in order for you to have adequate levels of B12, you actually need a gut microbiome that's healthy enough to sustain adequate levels of B12 synthesis inside your body, okay? So there's that. Now, as far as the iron thing, and he says, spinach, you only absorb 2% of the iron. The number's not 2%. The minimum amount is 4%. That's the minimum, okay? And it depends on what you pair the spinach with. Now, if you eat spinach by itself, then yeah, sure, depending on your gut microbiome, you can have an absorption rate that is like, 4%. You could, but that's the bare minimum. But people don't just sit down and just like, I'm just going to have a meal of just spinach. That's not true. It's not how that works, right? Now, he's a medical professional and a metabolic expert, so he should know that when you pair vitamin C with iron-rich foods, you can increase the iron absorption in those foods to like at least up to 85, if not 100%. So again, nuance, right? So let's say if you wanted to get more iron in your diet, which, by the way, if you wanted to reverse anemia, on a plant-based diet is very conducive to that, right? So if you have low iron, you know what you do? You increase your vitamin C content, you increase your copper, and you increase your B12 content, right? As well as chlorophyll. To sustain healthy levels of iron, you don't just need iron, you need other things paired with it. And then you also need other things that facilitate the conversion and retention of certain minerals. For example, magnesium, right? Which the more animal products you eat, the more magnesium deficient you can become, because going back to saturated fat reduces magnesium absorption in your intestines. So nuance, right? So, and this is the reason why a lot of people who have an animal product rich diet, they're often deficient in magnesium and they struggle to lose the weight as a result, right? This is how you get men with erectile dysfunction, high blood pressure, no libido, and all this type of stuff, and end up dying, especially black men like myself, dying at 55, 65 years old of heart disease, right? So you got to be a little bit more nuanced than that about the whole iron thing. It's a bit more nuanced. If I'm eating spinach, I'm probably mixing it with like different types of fruits, maybe tangerines, kiwis. I'm mixing it with grapes, or I'm at least mixing it with bell peppers. Bell peppers are very rich in vitamin C. Okay. Spinach also contains vitamin C as well. So, when you add a variety of other different greens, you add peppers and things like that. I'm a big fan of adding bell peppers. If you add tomatoes are also rich sources of vitamin C as well. And so these things contribute to the increased absorption of vitamin C, of iron. Also, you don't necessarily want to maximize your uptake of iron either, right? Because you can absorb too much iron. And you can actually have an excess amount of heme iron stored inside your liver. And iron is very prone to oxidation. So if you get a lot of oxidation inside your liver of iron, for example, that it can actually damage and degrade your liver function significantly. Okay. And there's even been men where they were having low testosterone as a result. And I don't understand why I have high testosterone. I have high total testosterone and really, really, really low free testosterone. And what they learn is iron binds up testosterone. So excess iron can actually inhibit or significantly degrade or reduce your level of free testosterone, because you get this excessive binding of your testosterone. And so again, you can have heart disease, high blood pressure, insulin resistance, diabetes, erectile dysfunction, low sex drive, struggle to build muscle, and all of this type of stuff because of this excess iron stored inside your liver and binding up free testosterone, right? And so one solution that they came up with, there's two solutions. One is a plant-based diet, okay? And then the other solution, and it was funny too, because it was a carnivore diet guy who was talking about this. And he was saying, I don't understand. I get a lot of zinc in my diet. I get a lot of protein in my diet. I don't understand why my free testosterone is low. And his solution was he's just going to go get blood drawn. So he would just have blood removed from his body so that the iron can leave his liver and enter his bloodstream, so he can kind of bring the iron levels back down a bit. So he's not storing this excess level of iron that's crushing his testosterone. So I'm like, all right, so basically you're sticking needles in yourself in order to address the iron issue. Okay. There is something called vitaminosis, and it's the overaccumulation of fat-soluble vitamins, right, or fat-soluble nutrients in general. So in particular, when it comes to things like meat, you got to be careful about this, because you can actually consume excess amounts of, for example, vitamin A. Okay. And this could be very problematic for your liver as well. So you can really wreck your liver with consuming this excess amount of protein and fat and iron and vitamin A and all of this type of stuff, right? To the point your skin become like yellow, your eyes become yellow, all types of stuff. You get acid reflux and gout, excess uric acid, and all this type of nastiness, right? And wreck your kidneys. So having a more balanced diet. So again, there's some vital nuance that's missing from his take here. All right. But anyways, let's continue.
You need carbs for energy. Now, while carbs are one source of energy, but they're not the only source of energy, guys. When you're keto adaptive, your body becomes efficient at using fat and ketones as its primary fuel source. Elite athletes and endurance runners have found they can perform exceptionally well on low-carb diets without carb loading. Studies on low-carb athletes showed that after a period of adaptation, they can actually access their body fat stores more readily, which is a huge advantage for sustained energy. Lie number.
Okay, so do you need carbs for energy? I mean, the word need is doing a lot of work there, right? What is a more sustainable source of energy? It's going to be carbohydrates, right? Now, can you have high levels of energy and whatnot without eating carbohydrates? Yeah, you can. But what did he say? He said it just takes a period of time for your body to adapt. This is true, right? How long that takes depends on the person. But essentially, yeah, you can become fat adaptive. You can, right? It depends on how you do it and why. So, for example, the body adapts to a shortage of food by making these hormonal adaptations so that you burn more of your stored fat for energy, right? So your body produces ketones, right? This is where the whole keto diet thing comes from, because of the whole keto thing. So if you reduce your protein and carbohydrates enough and you have mostly like a fatty diet, then this can drive you into ketosis and your body can more effectively tap into stored fat and use that for energy, right? So that's the adaptation that he's talking about, right? Now, if you're an athlete, do you want to create a shortage of food that you adapt to? No, I don't know why you would do that, right? You could just eat carbohydrates and then you don't have to go through this whole drag and conversion into ketosis and no, right? You could just be well fed and just be an athlete. So it's one of these things of like, yeah, just because you can doesn't necessarily mean you should. If I'm trying to maximize my training performance as an athlete, why would I put myself in an energy deprived state so I can adapt to a fatty diet? It seems, I don't know why I would want to do that, right? Now, if my goal is to maximize fat metabolism, well, I wouldn't do it with like a fatty diet and just cut all my carbohydrates. If I wanted to cut all my carbohydrates and be more fat adapted, I would just fast. Just having a fatty diet is the slowest way to get there, right? I would rather just fast and just not eat at all for a period of time and just get deep into a fasted state. Therefore, I get all of the benefits from the fast, and I'm not, consuming or slamming all types of dairy and cheese and butter and whatever else these people eat to try to have enough energy on a fatty diet or whatever like that. I mean, so yeah, either I'm going to be well fed and get an abundance of energy from being well fed, or I'm going to not be well fed, and in that case, I'm fasting. It'd be either or, right? So yeah, I mean, I suppose the word need is doing a lot of work there, but people do say that you need carbs for energy. I have heard people say that, and it's not necessarily true. You don't need carbs for energy, but your body primarily runs on carbohydrates for energy. And it's not really a whole lot of a benefit to trying to maximize your athletic performance while cutting all your carbohydrates. It's not really much of a benefit in doing that. All right.
Number 4, keto and carnivore diets are unsustainable. I should laugh at that too. While it's true that changing your diet requires an adjustment period, many people find these diets easier to stick with than they expected. Once cravings for sugar and carbs reduce, which happens after you're adjusted, you may find yourself less hungry and less dependent on frequent snacking. So many people, including myself, have found that steady energy and reduced cravings make these diets very sustainable in the long run. Lie number.
So when you're saying sustainable, is it sustainable? Well, it depends on your lifestyle. It depends on what pre-existing conditions you have. And it depends on what your food preferences are. Now, can you sustain a keto diet? I'm sure you can sustain it for a point. Some people can sustain it longer than others. You can sustain it for a month, 3 months. You can sustain it for a year. You could sustain it. I mean, You can sustain a crack habit, right? You can sustain a heroin addiction. So like just because something, it can you sustain something, is it sustainable? Technically. That could be good, that could be bad. It depends on the result that you're getting from that particular thing, right? The interesting thing about like a keto approach, right? You cut all your carbohydrates and just have like a mainly fat-rich diet, moderate amount of protein. If it's a high protein diet, it's going to kick you out of ketosis, and then now it's not a keto diet. Protein is actually insulinogenic. So when you consume protein, you get this initial increase in glucagon, and then that trades off, and you get this initial release in insulin, right? Because the glucagon ramps up fat metabolism, and the fat gets converted into usable energy in the form of glucose, and then insulin gets kicked on gradually in order to compensate. And then when protein, depending on how much protein you eat, a portion of that protein can get converted into glucose through gluconeogenesis, which then requires a degree of insulin in order to, shuttle the glucose inside your cells. This is the reason why, like a keto diet, if the protein, one of the biggest mistakes on a keto diet is people eat too much protein and it kicks them out of ketosis, right? And you have keto advocates talk about this. Like, yeah, if your protein intake is too high, it can kick you out of ketosis, right? So you can cut all your carbohydrates and still never get into ketosis because your protein's too high. So yeah, the whole sustainability thing. And the thing is like, yeah, I mean, are there benefits to doing a keto approach? Sure, but there are benefits to doing a lot of different things, but when do you receive the benefit? Is it on the front end? Is it in the back end? And then what do you have to trade in, or what do you have to sacrifice in order to get that benefit? That's an entirely different conversation. All right, let's get into number 5.
Number 5, high-fat diets cause high cholesterol levels. A common concern about keto is that the high-fat content will skyrocket your total cholesterol and total LDL cholesterol. While it's true that some people see an increase in LDL cholesterol in keto, research shows that low-carb diets often improve their HDL, which is a good cholesterol, and lower their triglycerides, which are the fats. In fact, many doctors are beginning to shift their focus to total cholesterol and total LDL cholesterol markers, such as markers of inflammation, HDL, triglyceride to HDL ratio, LDL particle sizes, and apolipoprotein beta-A ratio. These are all more accurate indicators of heart disease. So the idea that all high-fat diets are harmful to your heart is definitely outdated. Lie number.
Okay, so, and I really don't want to like accuse him of lying, right? So I'll just say maybe he just didn't know. The keto diet will definitely raise your cholesterol, right? Which is the reason why he said, oh, there's some people and they notice an increase in their LDL. That's a weird way to frame that. No, increased fat and protein intake will necessarily raise your cholesterol, right? What do you think cholesterol is made out of? Right? It's a lipoprotein. So yeah, with the increase in fat and protein in your diet, that will increase your overall cholesterol level. That's just a fact. So he later pivots in the claim that says, oh, but it improves your HDL. I mean, it can improve your HDL. It depends. So if it will improve or increase your HDL, if your HDL is low. Right? So as you get an overall increase in your cholesterol, yeah, your LDL and your HDL will increase, right? But the thing is, there's a lower threshold for HDL. So your HDL will rise to a certain point and then stop, but your LDL cholesterol keeps increasing. That's just a fact. Now, as far as when he's talking about inflammatory markers, it really depends, right? So the thing is, to develop a chronic metabolic disorder, it takes a few years, right? Typically, it takes like around 5 to 10 years. So if this is a thing that you were just doing for like 3 months or whatever the case is, now, can you see like a chronic inflammation and problematic issue developing in your body in a short period of time like that? Maybe, but most of the time it doesn't, right? So there's a certain amount of time that it takes for these issues to develop. So, if you're like, oh, I did it for a month and I got great results. Okay, great, right? But that's not really enough time to develop a chronic disease or a chronic illness from your diet, right? So it depends on how long you do it. But yes, does it increase your LDL? Yes. Can it increase your HDL? Yes, it can, but it depends on where your HDL is. And how fast does your LDL increase? Well, it depends on what your overall picture of metabolic health looks like. And it depends on your lifestyle, right? How much inflammation you've been having, what foods you've been eating, where you've been getting your fats from, where you've been getting your protein from, how you've been prepping your food, how much you've been cooking, how much of it has been grilled and all of this type of stuff. So it depends, right? So there's a bit more nuance. So like, for example, there is, what is this called? When you grill meat, right? Let's say you're cooking meat and you're frying it or grilling it or whatever. It creates toxins, right? For example, AGEs, right? These are advanced glycation end products, right? And essentially what these do is they basically age you. They don't just age you, but they create rampant levels of oxidative stress, and the increased level of oxidation that ages you, right? So that can destroy your vital organ tissues, that can damage your vascular tissues, and that can also degrade your skin to the point which shows on the outside, right? And you'll see this actually on a lot of like people. So for example, I know like if you look at like Ken Berry, or you look at, what's his name? It's this other guy, I'm blanking on his name, Eric something. Eric, what is his name? I don't know, there's a few though, right? And you can tell, they look older in the face, right? Face looks kind of dry, a little drawn, you can tell. They're very red. It's like very, very, very red, like a kind of like resembling a tomato a little bit. Right? I don't know. They could be like from a tanning bed or whatever the case is, maybe high blood pressure. I don't know. But, when you're eating all this meat and you're frying and grilling all this meat, it produces things like that. Then, of course, you got all the uric acid and whatnot, and that can take a toll on your liver. You have all this acid accumulation. And you can offset that with fasting. So, for example, if you're going to have this diet that is all like fat and protein, it would be a good idea to practice 20-hour fasts, 24-hour fasts, and things like that. But fasting is like a very important center of your diet. And then, of course, if you're going to be eating all these animal products and things like that, you can have people from the keto community where they'll add in things like cucumbers to their diet. They'll add in like berries, like a little bit of berries to their diet, and they'll add in leafy greens to their diet. They'll add in things like onions and bell peppers to their diet. So what they're doing is they're throwing more plants with antioxidants and things like that. There's these low carb, low glycemic plants into their diet, right? To get the antioxidants to kind of work against all of the toxins that get built up in the body as a result of eating all kinds of eggs and fish and red meat and things like that. Or, the carnivore people where, they add in things like fruit and honey because they have a thing about vegetables where all vegetables are trying to kill you, right? But fruit are fine. So then they'll eat fruit. So it'll just be like real high protein and then fruit, right? Which that can also work too, depending on how much fruit you're eating and how much meat you're eating. But of course, diet is a zero-sum game. So you can have a fruitarian style diet where you eat a little bit of meat. So you can eat fruit all day long. And then at the end of the day, you get like a significant amount of like protein and zinc and things like that from meat, right? So you can do that also. At that point, I don't know if that's a carnivore diet. It's more of like a fruitarian style diet with meat, right? So for example, Paul Saladino had like a high carb fruitarian style diet where he just added meat to it. And he dropped the name Carnivore MD and just started using his name, right? But essentially, he kind of adapted more of my mindset of having a fruit dominant diet, right? It's like fruitarianism, you're just adding meat at the end of the day or whatever the case is. So yeah, with that kind of, so there's those little nuances. But when it comes to, how much inflammation you get, heart disease, rise in cholesterol and all of that. A lot of that depends on lifestyle, how frequently you eat, what you're eating, meal prep, all that kind of stuff. So it will vary from person to person. Again, there's that nuance. Right? But anyways, let's go over number 6 here.
Number 6, keto leads to kidney damage. Now, here's the reality, guys. Unless you have pre-existing kidney disease, there's no evidence to suggest that keto or carnivore harms kidney function. For people with diabetes or insulin resistance, low-carb diets can actually protect kidney health by helping to stabilize blood sugars, lower insulin levels, which is critical for kidney health. And when you are working with a metabolically trained doctor like myself, you can actually continue your keto diet because they will know what to monitor and adjust accordingly. Lie number 7, carnivore.
Okay, so what he said about that, that's not true. Everyone starts off, everyone who has kidney disease at one point did not have kidney disease. So it's like, oh, there's no evidence it doesn't cause kidney disease. That's just not true. Now, again, these types of metabolic disorders, they take years to develop. So you can be eating a certain way for several years and your kidneys are fine. But they're fine up until the point that they're not. So like that claim is misleading because the thing is they won't make that claim when it comes to sugar. They'll say, oh, they'll say sugar causes diabetes, right? So the reasoning of people say, oh, processed food causes kidney disease or sugar causes kidney disease. But, you know, high levels of fat and protein, that doesn't cause kidney disease. And it's like, well, I've been doing this for a really long time and I've worked with a lot of people and helped a lot of people reverse kidney disease. Okay, I've been doing this for years. One of the things that work, and I've had people where they had to go on dialysis and they were able to turn things around and never had to get on dialysis and save their kidneys by cutting meat out of their diet and going on a raw vegan diet. Right? So there's that nuance thing again. So if we go back to, if the person has kidney disease, why do they have kidney disease? What causes the kidney disease? There's a variety of things. The mitochondrial disruption, the chronically elevated blood protein saturation or blood nitrogen saturation, the excess levels of lipids saturating the blood, the insulin resistance, right? The reactive oxygen species, the metabolites, the waste products, the acid that builds up in the body. This takes a toll on the kidneys. And so, yeah, at one point you didn't have kidney disease and now you do. And interestingly enough, you got like, what is it, like 90% of people who have kidney disease didn't know they had kidney disease, right? And kidney disease is one of the most common pathologies that people often deal with. And it's one of those things that people never even knew they had kidney disease, right? But even on a renal diet, you know, one thing they tell you is one of the best things that you can do is reduce your protein intake by at least 10%, right? Now, if a keto diet, can a keto diet help with your kidney function? It could. It depends on what caused your kidney disease. Let's say your kidney disease is caused by chronically elevated blood sugar that's stressing your kidneys out. Well, if you have a diet that is like very low glycemic, it's a very low glycemic diet, right? It's not really an insulinogenic diet. It's mainly some fats, moderated proteins, things like that. Can you see a significant enough reduction in blood sugar and that would have positive effects on your kidneys? Yes. Because some people, they have the kidney disease because of the chronically elevated blood sugar. If that's the case, then sure, cutting carbohydrates out of your diet can help. It helps to a point because all of the benefit you see in the short term up front, but then those returns diminish over time. And then when it comes to blood sugar, I mean, I have people who have blood sugar elevated even during a fast, right? You have people where they wake up in the morning and they wake up with really elevated blood sugar. They didn't even eat anything, right? People refer to this as the dawn effect. It's not just food that raises blood sugar. You can have protein-rich foods that keep your blood sugar perpetually elevated. You can have a really stressful lifestyle that perpetually elevates your blood sugar. You can have chronic pain and inflammation in your joints and elevate your blood sugar. You can get an infection, right? They elevate your blood sugar. It has nothing to do necessarily with how much carbohydrates you eat. It's a bit more nuanced than that. So ultimately, cutting out your diet, your carbs from your diet, and just having a fatty diet isn't like a thing that's necessarily all that beneficial, because it's not. Again, it depends on what you eat. But if you have a diet that is very rich in antioxidants, it's a very water-rich food diet, and then you have things like this, like burdock tea, burdock root, and yeah, that will help to salvage your kidneys and improve your kidney function, right? And then, of course, if you have herbs and things like chamomile, you can actually rehabilitate and regenerate your kidneys, right, through use of herbs like that. So, it's a bit, again, there's the thing with the nuance.
Carnivore is bad for your gut health. Many people, like myself, with IBS or other digestive issues actually find relief on carnivore, especially when it comes to bloating, gas, and inflammation. Now, while fiber can be beneficial for some, it can also irritate the gut lining in others, especially those with sensitive digestive systems. Research into gut microbiome health is evolving, and it's becoming clear that some people's gut
All right. Are we back? Well, I got hated on. It wouldn't shut me down. All right, I think we back. I gotta find that video again, man. We gotta finish up. What was we at? Number 6? Oh, okay. We gotta get back up here. I got to go back to, hold on a second. I got to go back to, what was we on? Point number 6? Is that what we was on? Okay, we covered point number 6. All right. Hold on a second.
Especially when it comes to bloating, gas, and inflammation. Now, while fiber can be beneficial for some,
Okay, yeah. So basically, he has IBS, and fiber affected fiber bothered his IBS. So he cut all of his animal product. He cut all of his plant foods out of his diet, and I guess went on like a carnivore diet. Now the thing is he talking about a keto diet or a carnivore diet? Because if he's a metabolic expert, surely he should know the difference, that they're not the same thing. Right? You can have a carnivore diet and it's actually a high protein diet and a low fat, low carb diet. And if that's the case, then it's not a keto diet. Right? So the only thing that would make it a keto diet was if the meat intake was reduced enough to lower the protein intake and then increase the dietary fat intake from like dairy and things like that. Right? So is he talking about a keto diet? Is he talking about a carnivore diet? Which one are you talking about? Right? So he's kind of pivoting and flipping back and forth between the two. Now, the thing is that if you want to improve your gut microbiome, you're not really going to improve your gut microbiome by eating meat. Because you either have to put more probiotics into your gut, or you have to feed those prebiotics to rebuild your gut, or you have to get like a bacteria transplant. You got to get like a gut bacteria transplant, right? Where you get like the microbes from someone else who has them, and then you get them put in your body, right? I'm not really going to detail that method. Kind of gross, but nonetheless, yeah, so that's essentially how that works. Now, if fiber bothers your gut, well, it depends on what fiber from what foods, right? Throwing the baby out with the bathwater is kind of a normie thing to do. But, if he's a metabolic health expert, then he doesn't understand the gut microbiome that much. So I'm not really going to ding him too much for that. Right? Because his whole thing is essentially, hey, the magic solution to all your problems is just don't eat carbohydrates. Which, are you a metabolic expert if that's really your solution to everything? Like, no, not really. Any random person on YouTube can tell you the solution to all your problems is just not eating carbs. You don't need to be like a physician or a nutritionist or a metabolic professional for people to tell you that, right? So like the things that he's saying in this video are like standard normie things that you could just do a quick Google search on, right? So I wouldn't even suspect him for being like like an expert in metabolic health based on this video, because he's not saying anything in particular that's like, this is like normie stuff, right? This is like simple, basic Google search stuff. And you can tell because it's very like oversimplistic. There's no nuance in his claims whatsoever, right? So it's just kind of like, the guy could have been like an electrician or something like that and made this video, right? So I wouldn't think that he has like a particularly extensive knowledge base on nutrition based on this here. Not to be a hater or anything like that, but I'm just saying, right? Just keeping it real.
it can also irritate the gut lining in others, especially those with sensitive digestive systems. Research into
So now the thing is, if you're going to talk about the gut microbiome, and this again, right, your solution to everything can't just be don't eat carbs. This is kind of like the lack of nuance is the thing, and it's kind of agitates me. It's this need to oversimplify complex things. Like you can't just be like, oh, you have IBS? Well, fiber agitates people's guts who have IBS. So just don't eat any fiber or plant-based foods. Dude. This is like trying to replicate a Picasso painting with like 3 crayons, right? Like you need more colors. you need more, you need a little bit more of a tool set here, right? It can't just be, oh, your solution to all your problems is just meat, dairy, and eggs. Like it's got to be a bit more nuanced than that, right? You're like, oh, gut microbiome, just don't eat carbs. Need to lose weight, just don't eat carbs. Want to be a great athlete, just don't eat carbs. It's like it has to be. You got to give a little bit more than that, right? It can't just be that. It's not that simple, right? And this is not an academic approach to the topic whatsoever. It's not a scientific approach to the topic. Like me, I talk about like a plant-based diet, but I talk about individual foods and the mechanisms, the biological mechanisms and whatnot of how this stuff works, right? And give you like the full picture. I wouldn't just come on here and just be like, oh, all you need to do is just eat fruit and nothing else. So whatever problem you have, just eat fruit. Right? No, there's herbs, there's fasting, there's exercise, there's different types of foods, there's your macros and things like that. There's things that you may need to do circumstantially. It's a bit more nuanced than that. All right, let's see. So moving on to, I believe we're on point number 8.
We've all heard this one, the concern that eating protein on keto or carnivore would turn diet.
Okay, let's go back.
Line number 8, all protein will turn to sugar. Yes. We've all heard this one, the concern that eating protein on keto or carnivore would turn that protein into sugar through a process called gluconeogenesis. That's been...
No one ever makes that term. No one would ever make that argument. The idea that if you're on a keto diet, your body would take all of the protein and turn it into glucose. I've never heard anybody make that claim. It's an insane claim to make. Now, there's a threshold, there's a ceiling on how much protein your body can really use at a time, right? When your body receives the protein that it needs, it will take the rest and convert it into glucose through a process of gluconeogenesis. Now, that depends on a variety of different ways. Not to mention that doesn't just pertain to dietary protein. So you can actually end up being in a catabolic state where if your blood sugar levels are low enough, and if the glycogen, the stored glycogen in your liver is low enough, and if you're active enough with enough with enough thermogenesis going on in your body from activity, you can put yourself in a catabolic state where the actual protein structures in your body, to one degree or another, can actually go into a catabolic state, and you can have a breakdown of formed proteins in your body. And the stored proteins in your body can be broken down and converted into glucose. So gluconeogenesis doesn't just apply to the foods you eat, it also applies to the protein structures that are already present in your body. Right? I've never heard anybody make this claim. Now, you'll get more gluconeogenesis the lower your carbohydrate intake is. That is true. And so the lower your carbohydrate intake is and the higher your protein intake is, you will get more gluconeogenesis as a result. Because protein is the most thermogenic macronutrient in the human diet. And the second one from that is carbohydrates, and dead last is fat. Fat is the least thermogenic, right? So basically, the protein is much more susceptible to the thermogenesis, and so that's going to be a lot more bioavailable to break down into simpler forms. However, it's circumstantial. How active are you? How much protein does your body need, etc., right? So it's a bit more nuanced than that, but yeah, nobody makes this argument.
Repeated over and over again, but here's the thing, guys. While gluconeogenesis does occur, it's a demand-driven process, not supply-driven. This means your body only creates glucose from protein when it's needed, not simply because you ate protein. In fact, adequate protein intake is essential for muscle maintenance, hormone production, and overall health. So,
yeah, but you just said adequate, and it's both demand-driven and supply-driven. It's both. The more you increase the supply, the more the supply exceeds the demand, the more gluconeogenesis you get, because your body does not store extra protein. I'm actually surprised that he's actually making this argument, because he should know this as a metabolic expert. He should know this. So it's both driven by supply and demand, right? Anything that necessitates hormonal adaptations in order to balance and stabilize the metabolic process requires a supply and demand curve, right? Because you have one hormone on one side and one on the other. And those levels will shift in an inverse correlation depending on the supply versus the demand. So yes, you need adequate levels of protein to sustain your body. That is true. That implies a certain threshold. And when you exceed that threshold and your body doesn't store the protein, what do you think your body's going to do with it? It's the most thermogenic. So it's the most easiest to convert and use as a form of energy, but it has to convert it to glucose in order to do that. And when you consume protein on the front end, that ramps up glucagon, right? Higher glucagon leads to more oxidation of fat as well as more gluconeogenesis, depending on how much metabolic stress is on the body currently. Right? So yes, it's both driven by supply and demand, not one or the other.
So don't worry. Moderate protein won't knock you out of ketosis or spike your blood sugar in a significant way. And never forget that low-carb diets are moderate protein diets, not high-protein diets. Lie number 9.
So that's true. But again, when you're saying moderate, and it won't kick you out of ketosis that much, no, you're either in ketosis or you're not. It either knocked you out of ketosis or it didn't, right? So when he says don't worry or whatever like that, you're oversimplifying the issue. And then also, if you're going to get into moderate protein or whatever, well, what's moderate? How do you quantify that? So if somebody wanted to get into ketosis and they had a worry about eating too much dietary protein, well, how do you make sure that you're not eating too much protein to the point where it will kick you out of ketosis? That would have been a great opportunity for him to quantify what moderate protein is. Is it 16% of your macros? Is it 20? Is it 25%? Is it 35? Is it 40? Which one is it? How do you calculate it? Is it protein per kilogram of lean mass? Is it per kilogram of total body weight? What is it? Right? So he could have given some numbers there, right? If he wanted to say what moderate is. But, maybe that's just me nitpicking too much. So I'll drop that point.
Keto causes ketoacidosis. Shockingly, guys, many clinicians and doctors are worried about this one. So let's clarify. Nutritional ketosis is achieved through a low-carb diet. It's not the same as diabetic ketoacidosis, which occurs mainly in people with uncontrolled diabetes. Nutritional ketosis keeps ketone levels in a safe range, whereas ketoacidosis involves dangerously high ketone levels and elevated blood sugar, and is life-threatening, guys. Nutritional ketosis, on the other hand, is a natural and safe metabolic state. In fact, I've been a low-carb doctor for over 11 years, and I've never seen anyone going into ketoacidosis from nutritional ketosis, except for one exception. You have any idea what that exception is? Well, it's only when patients are taking medications like Jardiance, which can cause something called euglycemic diabetic ketoacidosis. And this can occur when anyone taking a drug in the category of SGLT2 inhibitors are doing keto. Thankfully, the guidelines for therapeutic carb restriction on Low Carb USA's website will give doctors feedback on how to manage that. It's important to know that.
So you can tell he's a little bit more informed on the pharmaceutical side, right? The medical side. The nutrition side, maybe not so much, right? But this is where, like, if you wanted to ask him about like a medication, he would know about that. As far as nutrition, no, I don't know. Maybe to some degree or another, I'm not sure. I haven't really heard of anybody say, hey, don't do keto because it's going to put you in ketoacidosis. I've never heard anybody make that claim. Um, so, yeah, basically, he hasn't mentioned dehydration. He hasn't mentioned that it drives you deeper into insulin resistance. He hasn't mentioned that, which you'll have like the reason why keto advocates will fearmonger about fruit is because when you eat keto for long enough, if you go on like you eat a handful of grapes, it'll run your blood sugar up real high. And the reason why is because you've driven yourself into a state of physiological diabetes. Insulin resistance is a lifestyle adaptation. Insulin sensitivity is a lifestyle adaptation. If you have a diet that requires you to be insulin sensitive, like a high carb diet, it's like if you eat a whole food, plant-based diet where like the carbohydrate intake is anywhere from like 65 to 80% of your macros, then that creates more insulin sensitivity as an adaptation. Your body will adapt to that diet, right? And you'll become more insulin efficient. Now, a diet like that, relatively low in fat, so the saturation of blood fat would be significantly reduced as you get deeper into eating a diet like that, right? And then, of course, as you get more manganese, more magnesium, you get more potassium in your diet, you get more vitamin C, B vitamins, fiber that serves as prebiotics for the probiotics inside your gut and all of this type of stuff. These things together, also a plant-based diet, you get an abundance of antioxidants, right? Polyphenols, and alpha carotene, beta carotene, carotenoids, right? Basically all the carotenoids, all this type of stuff, tannins, etc. These things are all very protective and they're conducive to reducing stress in your body. And as you lower stress in your body, that improves insulin sensitivity, right? So your body will adapt. And that's essentially how you can create physiological insulin sensitivity, right? So yeah, basically, fats are not, I mean, they can be good, they can be bad. Carbohydrates can be good, can be bad. It depends on what food they're packaged in, right? So, for example, getting carbs from a variety of different foods, like you're getting carbs from like foods that have a red pigment, an orange pigment, yellow pigment, green pigment, violet pigment, orange, right? So you're getting all these different pigmentations of your carbs. You're diversifying, right? You're getting in all types of peppers, onions, greens, fruits. You're getting different whole grains, whether it be buckwheat, oats, quinoa, things like that, which of course I'm more of a proponent for a high raw diet, right? Where if I eat a meal like this, that's not fruit, it's typically going to be towards the end of the day, right? But food choice ultimately is like the best thing that you can focus on. And most human foods are plants. So if you're just going to have a diet where it's just all like, I mean, how many times a day are you going to eat like, we need to have a cup of milk with just like, what, a few ounces of red meat and an egg or something like this? Like, what does your diet look like? You got to diversify up a little bit, right? But anyways, interesting video nonetheless. Now, well, you said they didn't want you to talk about this. I don't know. My internet just shut off and eventually came back, so I'm glad about that. I thought that was going to be it for me tonight. Okay. So now talking about like a keto diet, but the vegan version. Because is a keto diet necessarily like a bad thing? Am I just inherently against it? No. It can be beneficial. Can be. So for example, I can do like a raw vegan diet. And that could largely be a variety of nuts and seeds, avocado, leafy greens. And that would essentially be my diet, right? It would just be like nuts and seeds, avocado, and leafy greens. I could do that, right? And then I can throw in things like mushroom stews, right? So I could do that also. I could do mushroom stews. Um, I could do zucchini and cucumber and things like that. So yeah, you could. Uh, However, I don't really think there's a great reason for doing that. This is me personally. I think there's a benefit to reducing your carbohydrate intake to some degree or another. You could. So you can have, let's say, instead of having, 300 grams of carbs a day, maybe you have 200 or 150. Do you need to cut your carbs down to 24 net grams of carbs a day or whatever? No. You can if you want, right? Is there a whole lot of benefit to doing that? Not necessarily. Can you lose a lot of weight doing that? You can. But when you start eating the carbs again, just understand the weight's going to come back pretty quickly because your body's going to get rehydrated, your glycogen stores are going to get refilled, and so that's going to add some weight to you. So you can do that and you can drop let's say 14 pounds in a very short period of time and then gain back 8 of those pounds by the end of the week once you start eating carbs again. Right. And they go, oh no, I'm gaining all the weight back. Oh no. And then you start cutting all your carbs again and you're doing this yo-yo thing. Right? So I think you have to have a bit more of a nuanced approach. So rather than focusing on cutting carbohydrates, it would make more sense to focus on having certain foods that have certain nutrients and certain benefits to them. Right? So, for example, you have the coconut yogurt in the morning with the mix of blueberries, blackberries, strawberries, sliced kiwis, hemp seeds, things like that, right? And you can have that's one meal. So there's a lot of fat in that meal, right? You got all your omega-3, 6 essential fatty acids, omega-3, omega-6. You got an abundance of magnesium and zinc and selenium and all this type of stuff in that meal, right? The coconut yogurt, significant amount of fat. The hemp seeds, significant amount of fat, right? So that's a lot of fat right there in that meal. The only carbs you would get is from the berries in there and the kiwis, right? And even from those fruits, you're still getting fats from those fruits too. Is that a low carb meal? You could say that, but it's very beneficial nonetheless. You can juice first thing in the morning. You can juice Granny Smith apple and cucumber, right? And so you can just drink this 24-ounce thing of just juiced cucumber and Granny Smith apples. Right? You could do that too. Is that low carb? Depends, right? It's mostly water. Is it high carb? Not necessarily, right? So it depends. Are you saying low carb as in just overall amount of glucose, or are you saying low carb as what percentage of that drink is carbohydrates? Because most of it is water, right? So if 80 or 90% of it is water, you're going to say it's high carb. Well, it's not high carb because it's 90% water. Water is not carbs at all. So it depends on how you're quantifying that. Maybe it's just me being a bit autistic and I'm saying that, right? Maybe. You let me know. Second, a third meal of the day. So you have the juice and then you can have that whole smoothie bowl thing. And then a third meal, you can have you can do apples, pineapples, tangerines, grapes, a variety of different fruits in a bowl, right? So you could do 10 to 12 ounces of a variety of different foods. So you can actually have 4 pounds of fruit in this one bowl, right? And that would be most of your carbs for the day. And then the next meal after that could just be a salad where it's just all leafy greens, onions, bell pepper, cucumber, squash, zucchini in there, some pumpkin seed kernels, sunflower seed kernels, cashews, crushed walnuts, that type of thing. And you can have seasonings in there, nutritional yeast, paprika, chili powder, curry, whatever the case is, right? Garlic, whatever you want to season it with. Or you could just put agave. Well, agave is It's mostly like fructose. So it's actually kind of a sugar, right? So I don't know if that would be like actually, no, that would work in a low glycemic meal because agave is low glycemic. So you could do like agave and like mustard, right? A little sea salt, nutritional yeast. You can even put some lime juice or whatever for a little extra kick and mix all of that in to the salad, right? You can do that whole thing. You can add avocado on top of it for the additional fats. So you can have a meal like that. It's not really keto. It's not really high carb either. It's kind of somewhere in the middle. But that is like a fully raw plant. That's like a fully raw thing. You don't have to cook anything in that, right? Juice, smoothie bowl with the coconut yogurt, fruit bowl, and then low glycemic salad at the end of the day, right? And you're eating all your colors, right? So you're getting everything. You're getting everything from, you're getting the violet, red, orange, yellow, green. You're hitting the full spectrum, right? Fats, carbs, water, everything, right? And then you can drink herbal teas. Like you can do basil tea, you can do burdock tea, ashwagandha or chamomile or whatever the case is. And with that, you don't necessarily have to worry about too much fats or too much carbs or anything like that, because with that dietary approach, it's all about food choice. So it's about optimizing for having a peak medicinal diet. You're not necessarily worried about calories. You're not worried about macros. It's all about food choice. That is a very beneficial approach. And what's interesting is just eating raw like that, that's very conducive to weight loss, right? It's not starchy. It's not really fatty. It's very fiber rich, very water rich. So that can actually be extremely beneficial. And then if you have difficulty metabolizing like nuts and seeds or whatever, because the fats make you gassy or whatever, or bloated, then you may want to like prime your gut by drinking basil tea or ginger tea first. And then you can actually improve, like you can flush your liver and improve your gallbladder and liver and kidney health by drinking burdock tea, a couple times a day. That's my approach. Or at least that's one of my approaches to nutrition. It depends. If you're trying to build muscle, then you can really pack on the carbs. There's no reason to cut carbohydrates if you're trying to build muscle, right? If you're trying to drop body fat, you could have a medicinal diet and then you can pair it with some type of fasting or something like that, right? So, the approach is a bit more nuanced. It's not just this simplistic thing of just like, oh, just eat more meat and don't eat carbs. It's a little bit more nuanced than that. All right. I've been on here for a long, long time. I feel like I've been talking forever. But anyways, folks, I appreciate y'all joining me tonight. Appreciate you for tuning in. We said Miss Cox, book a consultation. Yeah, that's right. If y'all need help with your diet, training, things like that, you can either hit the link in the description of this video. You can book a call with me, or you can join my 12-week mentorship. You get step-by-step how to train, how to eat, self-development video series, and the 12-week mentorship comes with weekly coaching calls. All right, so all of that is included. And yeah, I think that about covers it. I almost forgot to plug that. And definitely, folks, kick that like button. If you like the stream, like the stream, right? All right, good people. Oh, you said if I ate 300 grams of carbs, I would blow up. I'm already having a hard time losing eating fruit even a little bit. It depends on what the rest of your diet looks like, right? Yeah, so it depends on what the rest of your diet looks like. And it depends, like, are you drinking any herbal teas? Are you exercising? That kind of thing. What are the foods you've been eating? What fruits have you been eating? Because your gut may respond to certain fruits better than others. So it depends. Again, it's more nuanced, right? That's why I really encourage people to book a call with me to get more in-depth answers that are more specific to your situation, right? Because the cookie cutter thing will only get you but so far. All right. But anyways, having said that, it's time to move on with my night. I'm going to finish my tea and catch up on responding to my messages and whatnot that I've gotten over the last couple hours. And I will talk to y'all. What is next Monday? Oh. Yes, I'll catch y'all next Monday, the 30th, God willing. Anyways, take care, good people. Talk to you soon.